Happy Tuesday, March 3rd, everybody. Happy March. I can't believe how fast this year has flown by, but there's so much happening in the consulting world, and we're looking forward to sitting down with you for the next hour to break down a playbook for landing your MBB internship. As most of you know, the kind of internship recruiting timeline has been upended by McKinsey. So your deadlines are really soon. I'll share that on the next slide. But we wanted to put this together to kind of lay out step-by-step guidance for you to succeed in every step of the recruiting process, from the application to all important networking to interview prep and beyond, including digital assessments. And so that's what we're here today to share. I'm joined by my colleague Katie Neff, who's our black belt advisor, as well as Miley Dyer, who is one of our instructors and case coaches here. And we're really looking forward to learning and sharing together today. So let me move over to my next slide here. And I'm going to turn it over to Katie to just kind of walk through really quickly a couple of the deadline for McKinsey, and then how you can kind of work with us to join kind of an accelerated prep program. Katie, over to you.
Thanks, Shafa. Hey, everybody. This is a great session to just kind of get focused on a pretty rapid timeline that has surprised all of us. So March 29th is really our target. And if you're feeling like you're not ready, you have time, but you don't have that much time. So this is our specialty. We can help you get ready, accelerate that prep by not only helping you with a tailored prep plan from working with me and the coaches, but also working with the coach one-on-one so that you can identify those blind spots that we all have and how to actually fix them, fix anything that you're struggling with rapidly. So Black Belt is our foundational program. You get everything you need to recruit and interview. We have 15 seats left. Our March cohort closes next Tuesday, and we kick it off with a welcome call, meet some of our coaches on Wednesday, March 11th. And this is a great way for you to understand how you can best work with a coach and target the work you need to do and not waste your time on things you shouldn't be doing. Our editing package, if you want to get started with just edits, we can get your resume and cover letter consultified so that you put that best profile forward when you apply and when you're having those great coffee chats. If you're not sure, you can book a call with me. Everything is in the QR code and we'll put it in the chat. You can even ask me throughout this event. I'm here and you can just chat me directly. All that being said, we're going to give you a little bit of our insider secrets today. So I'll turn it back over to Japheth to kick that off.
Love it. Thanks so much, Katie. Yeah, all the resources just are at the QR code. So grab your handy dandy phone and scan that. And we'll also pop links into the chat for you to be able to access. And last thing I'll call out, if you're a student partner, check that discounts tab in your account for a discount on these packages and these programs. We would love to work with you. The March Black Belt cohort is going to be rocking and rolling. It's going to be a full cohort. Really looking forward to that, and we'd love to have you be a part of that. Well, all right. Well, now it comes to good stuff. I'm going to turn it over to Miley Dyer here. Miley, while you're pulling up your screen, I'll just quickly introduce you. So Miley has been with us, gosh, how long has it been? It's been a couple of years, at least,
Yeah,
but
at least 2 days.
that's awesome. Miley is one of our most popular coaches, has done a phenomenal job, and we're excited to hear from her as she kind of leads today's session. While she is leading that, if you've got any questions, pop them in the chat. Myself and Katie will answer. Then we'll also have a dedicated time of Q&A at the very end of the session if there's time left. And we'll also answer some of your pre-submitted questions that you sent in. So thank you so much for those. Miley, would love to just for you to share a little bit more about your background, your journey into consulting, and kind of what you do here at Management Consulted before we dive into the content.
Sure. I'm happy to be here and happy to help you all. So I'm Miley Dyer. I'm originally from Hawaii and I loved it, but wanted the exact opposite experience. I moved to New York City. And I went to NYU, studied economics and psychology. I actually knew what management consulting was, but I decided not to apply and as an undergrad, which I think was a mistake. So I'm glad you all are here. I instead did market research. So I went and applied to market research firms, did that for several years, and then realized, market research is just one thing that consultants do. So I really wanted to go and get a broader strategy toolkit. So I went and pursued an MBA at the University of Chicago at Booth, and that's when I did my management consulting experience. I interned the summer between my first and second year, and then went back full time to Bain, New York. So I was a consultant and then a manager, and then have been coaching with Management Consulted for a couple years now. So I'm a coach, and I'm also a case competition facilitator. But my main thing is coaching, and so like other coaches, we're here to help throughout the entire process. So everything from, what firm should I apply to how do I network? And then through obviously interview prep, both case and behavioral prep. And then even sometimes with the decision, hopefully you get a couple of firms or maybe more that you can choose from, and then we're happy to help there too. But that's just a little bit about me. But again, there are several coaches at Management Consulted who could help you. All right, so I'm gonna move forward. We're gonna start with a poll here. When are you expecting to apply? If you can fill out in the poll, that would be great.
Wonderful. Give me 2 seconds to launch that poll. Boom. All right, poll's up. I'll give you about 10 seconds to fill this out so we can get a quick feel of right who's on the call here today so we can best tailor this to you. Right off the bat, looking like March is the biggest time frame. I'll do another 5 seconds before closing this and sharing the results. So last chance to get your answers in. All right, here we go. We've got about 60% applying in March, and the next biggest category is about a third of you not quite sure yet. So great to have you here with us, and we'll do our best to answer your questions and give you a clear plan, whether you know for sure or you're not quite sure yet when you'll apply.
Thank you. Okay, so let's get into today's agenda. So the first thing I want to talk about is your application, just what's expected and how to develop a resume that's going to stand out. I'll then get into some of the networking aspects. So this is actually something that's pretty important to ensure that you actually get an interview. And then we'll talk about digital assessments just briefly. So now that they are like commonplace at all of the MBB firms, we'll talk a little bit about that. And then we'll move on to case and behavioral prep so that you have an idea of what's expected. All right, so in terms of the application, it's a little bit different by firm, but of course, all three here do require a resume. And that is just obviously table stakes. It is oftentimes the most important thing that they look at. And so you want to make sure that your resume is in tip-top shape. Cover letters are, I guess for Bain, it is required. BCG is optional. McKinsey actually does not read cover letters, so would not, there's no need to submit one there. In terms of submitting for BCG, we think if you do have a strong cover letter, you should submit it. That makes sense too, if it can help tell your story a little bit better. Test scores are obviously table stakes as well, so make sure you have access to those. And then in terms of digital assessments, each firm has a little bit of a different experience. So Bain has SOVAR Test Gorilla. BCG has CCA, which is more of a like behavioral video type of assessment. And then McKinsey has Solve, which is more of a game that you have to play. So we'll go in a little bit more about that in a few minutes. All right, so in terms of the resume, This is, as I said, very important. We recommend that you just stick to 4 sections, and those specifically are education, experience, leadership, and personal. Education, obviously, you should have your college there and anything else that's relevant. We do recommend that you put education post high school. And then in terms of experience, that's usually like your work experience, whereas leadership is where you put all of the great things that you've done on campus, or even sometimes things outside of campus. So if you volunteered a nonprofit or something and you have a decent leadership role, you could put that in that section. And then finally, in terms of personal, that's where you would put your languages, your skills, and your interests. We do say that it's pretty important that you put the interests in there, just so that there's something in there that kind of humanizes you a little bit, and it often can serve as a nice icebreaker. So again, these 4 sections, and we do say that a 1-page resume is really the gold standard here. Now, in terms of the actual content for your bullets, we do recommend a CAR format. So that's context, action, and results. And I think a lot of people make the mistake of thinking that the resume is a job description and just listing out like your responsibilities, when really you should be thinking about your resume in terms of a highlight reel. So what are the like big accomplishments that you achieved in that role? And so you should have, or you should be really specific as to what you did. So did you analyze some sort of data? Did you build a model? Did you interview people? And then what was the actual result? And to the extent that you can quantify it, we highly recommend that. So, a 10% increase in attendance, or, $5 million in funds raised, or whatever it is. And then finally, know that your resume is really your story. It's going to be, it's fair game for your interviews. So know that it has to be things that are completely honest, as well as know that you could be asked about specific lines in there. So make sure if you put an interest in there, you actually have an interest and can talk about it, for example. Okay. So we move on to networking. This is something that you should start today. The reason is we have less than a month before McKinsey's internship deadline is going to be here. So it is important that you network, because it does open doors that applications alone can't. Referrals do increase interview chances. Now, I will say it's important that you are targeted with your outreach. And so the first thing that we recommend is to build a contact list. So, if you're applying to, say, BCG Chicago, for example, there's like 1 million people you could probably, maybe not 1 million, but a lot of people that you could reach out to. And so we recommend that you first start with maybe the people who attend the same school as you. So are there alumni in that particular office that you can reach out to? And I would either use your school's alumni platform, or you can, for free, go to LinkedIn and just search for people. But you could filter for the firm, the office location, the school that you attend, as well as other things, like maybe there's somebody who is in like the same sorority as you or something like that. But we recommend building a list in a spreadsheet, and then you can actually kind of rank in order who you think you should reach out to based off of who you think is most likely to respond. And the more that you have in common with someone, the more likely they'll be able to respond. So if it's someone who's majoring in the same thing as you, or again from the same hometown, we recommend that. But generally we say there's this 2 by 2 rule, which is that you should try to limit your outreach to just 2 people from the office that you're interested in, and contact them 2 times in the span of 2 weeks. That's because we don't want you to necessarily be bombarding the entire office. You don't want to be the person that's spamming the whole office. So do some targeted outreach. If you haven't heard back, you can move on to the next 2 people. But given that we have a tight timeline here, I would maybe recommend, instead of the 2-week time period, maybe move it more towards a 1-week time period. For example, if you reach out to somebody today and you follow up with them on Friday and you don't hear back by, say, Tuesday, I would move on to the next 2 people. But as you're reaching out to people, also know that you will need to prepare for these calls. So make sure you have, a 1 minute or so, or maybe 2 minutes intro of who you are, so that when you start the call, you can introduce yourself appropriately, and then have a list of questions that make sense for that person that you're contacting. As always, you want to make sure that you're presenting yourself in a very positive way. So obviously, try not to be disparaging of the firm in any way or of yourself, and make sure you leave with a good impression. Okay, so I'm going to move on to the digital assessment. And this is important to note because it's been a more recent development for all the firms. But the idea here is that it's really the bridge between your application and receiving a round 1 invitation. So we treat them as what we call round 0, which is after you apply, you get an invitation to complete a digital assessment. And they are testing a few things. It depends on the firm, but typically it is around structured thinking. So can you actually figure out how to approach the problem correctly? Can you actually do the math, set up the problem, calculate the math correctly? And then in terms of decision making under pressure, you do get a finite amount of time to complete this. So it's important that you move quickly, but also you might not be given perfect information. So with whatever limited information that you have, you need to make a smart decision relatively fast. This is just, one data point in how firms evaluate you. So try not to freak out if you don't feel like you aced them. Also, in some of these situations, there's not like one exact, perfect right answer. So know that it's sometimes how you think that they care about. I will say, a great performance on this likely won't really move the needle for a candidate that already has a strong resume or a profile, but it can help those who maybe are a more fringe candidate, or maybe your test scores aren't as good as others, or sometimes non-target schools. It can really help. And so we say to prepare for this, we do recommend, general case prep, because this is a good way of practicing all those skills that are needed for the digital assessments. And we have several, practice tests from these firms on the management consulted site, and Black Belt actually does include practice tests from each of the firms. So if you have access to the platform, I always recommend folks to actually go in there and practice, so you're not, at least you know the format. Okay. All right, so we're gonna move on to a poll here. How many cases have you done so far? And we specifically want you to just think about the cases that you did out loud. So not just cases where you've watched or read, but ones that you have actually done one-on-one.
Thanks, Miley. All right, the poll is up and live, so get in your answers. I'm excited to see where folks are at. I'll give it about 10 more seconds. We've got about 80% of folks already answered, so that's pretty good. Another couple of seconds here, then I'll close it out. All right, great. Let me share the results here. All right, Miley, can you see that?
Yeah, okay, so it looks like about a third said none so far, and 59% 1 to 5. So still early on, that's okay, but you'll want to very quickly ramp that up. And so, we're going to start a little bit today, but hopefully everyone gets to do more of the 6 to 10 in the next week or so. Great. All right. So moving on now, we're going to talk a little bit about what interview prep entails. And we do say, about 80% of your time should be spent on case prep, and then 20% on fit, or what we call behavioral prep. And so just in case you're not clear on that, case prep is, all of you get a prompt and you have to run through the entire case with an interviewer, often live. And there's all sorts of analysis and whatnot that you have to do. The fit or behavioral prep is more so where you're asked questions like, tell me about yourself, or why consulting, or tell me about a time when you had to work with a team. And so again, 80% of the time spent on case and 20% on fit. We do say that you should start with case because that is just, quite frankly, the more important piece, at least in round one. And at the same time, though, we don't want you to forget about behavioral prep. I do know people who aced the cases literally were told they completed it the best out of anybody, but didn't get the second round because they were told that their behavioral interviews were not very good. So don't forget about it and start early if you can. Okay, so we strongly believe that market sizing is a great place to start case prepping. And we are going to work through a market sizing problem live. So if you have a pen and paper ready, that would be great. But I'm going to talk a little bit about market sizing. And market sizing is pretty standard through across firms at the undergraduate level. Sometimes they are actually ahead of the round one, or they're kind of like a standalone problem. I know like UI Parthenon often just gives a market sizing problem, sometimes McKinsey, etc. So it's good to know how to do these. The point of these is that it's really a way to showcase some basic casing skills. So can you structure the problem? Can you set up the market sizing problem? Can you make reasonable assumptions about the inputs to actually calculate the market size? Can you actually do the calculations? So for something like market sizing, you're not going to be given a calculator, so you do need to be able to do the mental math and talk through it live. And then can you pull insights? So what's the final answer? Does it make sense in the context or what you know about similar industries and things like that? We say start with about 10 market sizing cases. Usually that's what people need to be able to like figure out that there's kind of a formulaic approach to this. But if you still feel like you are not up to par on market sizing, we do recommend that you do more until you're able to do these very quickly. Okay, so that we're going to actually try to do a market sizing problem, and I'm going to give you 2 minutes. So on your own, I'm going to set a timer here, but we're going to size the market for croissants in New York City. So think through how you'd solve the problem and try to actually calculate it in the 2 minutes that we have here. So I'm going to start the time now. All right, so you have about 30 seconds left. All right, so let's stop there. I realize that there might be several of you who actually don't even know what market sizing is, and that's okay. We're about to learn it. But let's go ahead and just take a quick poll and see how many steps did you take to solve the problem? And again, if you said 0 because you don't know, that's totally fine. And the other question we're going to ask is, what is the expected way to size the market?
Okay, we've got some answers coming in. Also, should we invite everybody to pop their answers in the chat for how many, the market size for croissants in New York? I want to see what everybody said. I'll give the poll another 5 seconds.
Cool. Anyone else want to pop in their answer? I'm going to just tell you right now, everyone's answer is probably going to be wrong. So it's totally fine. Cool. Great. Nice. Okay, so it actually looks like a number of folks did actually take several steps. It's actually, quite frankly, way better than I was expecting. So that's good. We generally say you want to have at least 5 steps when you market size. So I'll go over that in a little bit. And then in terms of how to size the market, it's typically revenue per year. That's what's expected. I will say it is good to clarify at the beginning with the interviewer, because sometimes it's actually units per year, but I think the fair assumption typically is revenue per year. Okay, so we got a wide range of answers. The point here is that there's no one right answer. What we're looking for is the approach and how you actually solve this problem. And, do you make reasonable assumptions? And ultimately, do you calculate something and sense check it to see if it makes sense? So this is what we would say is kind of our standard kind of formula to how to do market sizing. And obviously it might vary depending on the question that's asked. But here I have 5 steps at the top, and really there's like kind of a 6th step below. But you start with step 1, you take a population or the number of households or number of businesses, depending on the question. In our situation, we have croissants. And so I would go to consumer product or consumer good. I would start with the population. So I'd start with the population of New York City and go from there. Now, you'd want to use something like households if it was something like more like number of ovens or something like that. Or trying to calculate the revenue per year for ovens. That's going to be more like a household thing because there's just 1 per household typically. But here we have population for the croissants. So let's start there. And then we say for step 2, we want to break it into 3 to 4 segments. And so the way that you segment it is up to you. We have a few options that we recommend, which I'll get into in a minute. But for mine, I just did this really quickly before this call, and I picked age. So I decided to take the New York City population, which I think is about 8 million people, and I decided to break it down by 0 to 20, 21 to 40, 41 to 60, and then 61 plus. But you can use other age ranges too. That just seems fairly easy to get through. Once you break it into segments, you'll then want to get into the percentage who actually consume. So it depends on the question again. In our situation, it's probably the percentage of people who actually do go out and buy croissants. So you want to take those 4 segments that I made and allocate actual percentages for each of those segments. So maybe I think like ages 0 to 2, maybe only 40% of that age group is actually buying croissants. But again, make a reasonable assumption. Your percentage that you use for this one for 0 to 20 is probably not going to be the same for age 21 to 50. So make sure you allocate different percentages if it makes sense to. And then you'll move on to step 4 here, which is frequency of purchase. So how often are they purchasing it? Maybe it's once per month, maybe it's twice per month, whatever it is, make a reasonable assumption. And make it such that you can say, okay, they're buying at approximately 50 per year or something like that, or 20 per year, whatever you think it is. And then step 5 here would be to allocate an average price. Again, the price of a croissant for a 0 to 20-year-old might be different than a 21 to 40-year-old, because maybe a 0 to 20-year-old is just buying a basic croissant and it's cheaper than a 21 to 50 or 21 to 40-year-old. So you'll want to make different assumptions there. And then you're just multiplying it all out. On top of that, we do say that there's an extra percentage that you want to add in for anything that you don't think is covered in your market sizing, but still would be important. So in this case, I took the New York City population and sized that. What I'm probably missing are visitors. So people who come to New York City to visit and buy croissant while they're here. And so I'm not going to go out and separately calculate that out, because that would take a bit of time, but I might just allocate an additional percentage. So I might say, okay, to factor in visitors, I might add another 10% on top of the market size I just calculated. So that would be the amount that I calculated for the population plus the visitors, and that would be my total market size. Now, I think the one thing that we're missing here is for a lot of things, you're not buying them every single year or every single month or whatever it is. Something like a car, that is probably not purchased every year, and so you'll have to factor in a replacement rate. So say a car is replaced every 10 years or so, you'd want to take this amount and divide it by 10. So just don't forget about that. All right, great. So the next thing is just to explain what market sizing is for, and that is specifically structure, so just making sure that you stay organized and have an actual approach laid out like we just saw. In terms of problem solving, are you actually able to do the math and calculate it out? And does your answer ultimately make sense? And then finally, are you able to communicate throughout? So, this kind of math is different than you're used to in school, where in school you might be just silently writing out your problem and solving it on your own. In this situation, you're communicating with the interviewer what exactly you're doing, what your calculations are. So the interviewer needs to be able to actually follow what it is that you're calculating, because everyone kind of makes different assumptions. So the interviewer has to be able to follow along. Okay. And as I mentioned before, so in terms of the segmentation, you can choose a few different options. A lot of times it is age-based, so you can do different age ranges that make sense. Or you can go with an income, different income levels, geography, sometimes that's urban, suburban, rural. Gender is another one. Sometimes you do needs, although I honestly have never really seen anyone do that in a way that makes sense, but that's another option. We generally say the segmentation approach is the strongest if you want a robust answer, although I will say there are some situations, especially when market sizing is within a case, where it's not necessary to do segments. This is often the case with Bain, for example. They might have market sizing embedded in a case, and for those, you're not typically it's not necessary to do the segments. In fact, they want you to very quickly just take the population and go without segments. Just take an average across what you think what segments would be. Okay. Some basic info that would be helpful is some of these stats here, just so that you have a good starting point. That way, they know you know some of these basics. Typically, you don't have to memorize a ton of things with casing, but I would say with this, it's important. We say US population, obviously, if you're applying in the US. The population of the city you're living in case they decide to do it based off of where you currently are. Obviously, the population of the city you're interviewing for, where you'll be often working and might have to do some local consulting potentially. And then we say like a population of 2 countries per continent or so, just so that you can sound a little bit smart. For example, you might know the population of Spain. I think it's like 50 million or so. And maybe your case is on Portugal and you don't know what the Portugal population is, but you can reference and say, oh, I know Spain is 50 million. Portugal is a lot less than that. I'm going to assume it's, X amount, and they can correct you if it's wrong. When we say 2 countries per continent, India or China is not really a fair comparison, so it's best to pick countries that are more representative of the area. And then I'm just going back to the US population. That is the most frequent market sizing that I've seen. So use a number that's going to make sense for the problem. In some cases, that might be 320 million. Sometimes it's more like 350 million. So you want to think through that, but be able to split out your age increments well. We say like it's about 10 million people for every 5-year increment up until the age of 70. And then at 71 plus, it's more like 20 million people in that bucket. But you'll get used to it as you do more of these, which is why we recommend that you do at least 10. Okay. All right. So for most people, if you're like me, the case interview is really like nothing I'd ever seen before and had no idea how to even start preparing. So I'll go through a little bit now about how to approach learning how to case prep or how to case interview rather. But I will say the best performing candidates are those who can practice for 4 to 8 weeks. Some people practice a little bit longer. Some people maybe need a little bit less time if they have a lot of business experience for some reason. But knowing that you're applying for the internship, I'm going to say like 4 to 8 weeks is probably the sweet spot here. We, as I said, recommend starting with these market sizing questions. Once you do that, we recommend that you read, watch, maybe follow along and try doing it yourself as a video, as the video is playing. Try to actually do the case so that you can see what it's like to do it live. But we recommend doing 5 full cases where you watch and attempt, just so you can see different case styles. So there are interviewer led versus interviewee led. There's also like different case types, market sizing versus profitability versus M&A, etc. So just do a 5 or watch 5 so that you actually know like how the process works or what types of things you will see in a case, because all cases are different obviously, but there are some common things like doing a structure, looking at a chart, doing some brainstorming exercises, etc. Then after you've done that, we recommend doing a diagnostic interview with an expert. Ideally, this is somebody who's actually successfully landed a position at one of these firms, because those people obviously were successful at case prepping. So obviously that could be with a coach like myself, or it could be an alumni or somebody else at a firm. But try to do a diagnostic early so you know what your strengths are and what the development areas are especially. And then move on to doing 10 cases across different case types, which I'll get into in a minute. But this is a good way to just practice the different case types. And then once you've completed a case out loud, it's best if you can go back, like say in a week or so after you do the case, and try to do the case again yourself, just to see if you've seen improvement in the way that you did your framework or the speed of your calculations, things like that. And then finally, we obviously recommend to do drills to fill in those development areas, as well as additional mock cases. I will say a lot of people have this tendency to just do a bunch of cases in a row, like they schedule like 3 a day for a whole week. And that typically does not yield great results. You can think about this kind of like sports if you're a sports person, but most, I don't know, maybe with the exception of baseball, but with most sports, you're not doing a competition or meet every single day. You do drills, you train, you give yourself a little bit of a break, and then you keep going, right? And so similarly here, you want to do cases, but you also want to interchange that with some drills. So do mental math, do some structure drills, do some brainstorm drills, etc. But also make sure that you obviously are doing mocks so you can get that experience of talking live with somebody else. Anyway, so there's this QR code here. You can download our full case prep plans. You do have to be logged into the MC account to be able to access this, but we do have recommended plans for 4 weeks and beyond there. Okay. Now, in terms of planning, we think this is kind of a helpful structure in case you're not sure what to do. This here aligns with our case library. So we have, market sizing, then level 1, level 2, and then creative advanced cases. But as I said, 10 market sizing problems. We move on to profitability, which is our most common case type that we see in interviews. So we do level 1 profitability, do 4 cases there. Move on to market study, level 1, 4 cases. Then M&A, just do 2 cases there. Level 1, those are pretty honestly straightforward. And then you can move on to level 2. And the amount of cases that you do in level 2 kind of depends on where you're at and how comfortable you are. I find that people need to do about 10 at least. Some people do a lot more than 30. If you have, no business experience, you're really feel like you need more practice, then fine. But I wouldn't just do a ton of cases just to do them. Make sure that they're quality. And then step 5 is just when you get to the point where you feel like you've handled like the more straightforward cases, even if they're a little bit harder, level 2, you can do some creative and advanced ones. Occasionally firms will throw out, nonprofit case or a public sector case or something really futuristic. So just do a few there so that you're not freaked out when the interview comes. Okay. And then here are some milestones to just stay on track given the deadline coming up. So we are just suggesting this as a guideline. But by March 6th, we think you should finalize your resume. So make sure, the bullets have been reviewed, formatting is great, etc. We also think you should be reaching out to people and doing really heavy networking throughout March. Again, the reason is you can do all this wonderful case prep, but if you don't have an interview, then you don't have the chance to show off your skills. So the networking is really important for you to land that interview. So make sure you're doing that throughout March, and then do those 10 market sizing problems. By March 13th, we recommend 5 full cases out loud with a case partner. And then also some preparation for digital assessments, as well as doing some math drills, just so you can get used to doing that mental math and doing that math out loud. And then by April 1st, we recommend that you have a good sense and with structures. So with framework drills, we say like at least 10. I think a lot of people need more than 10, quite frankly. That's often an area that people really struggle with. And then you should be actually doing, obviously, level 1 cases at that point. So about 10 level 1 cases. And then finally, this is a good time to ensure that you have your fit prepared. You will need to actually develop stories that you can talk about in the interview. You'll need specific examples. So like, tell me about a time when you had to persuade somebody to do something, or tell me about a time when you failed. So you'll have to have those stories ready, and you'll have to make sure that you're explaining it in a way that it's easy to follow. And we're actually spending most of your time with the actions so that I know what it is that you actually did and how it applies to this role. And then by interviews, obviously, as I said, exposure to the different case types. Make sure that you're really structured with brainstorming. That's an area that people often struggle with as well. And then just a lot of comfort with charts and graphs, etc., because you can be thrown a table that you have to interpret, or you can be thrown a bar chart, or you can be thrown even something more complex. So make sure that you're comfortable with all different types of graphs that you can see. All right, so I think I'm going to turn it over back to Katie at this point, and then we'll answer some questions.
Beautiful.
Go ahead, Jacob. Yeah.
Thanks, Miley. Gosh, I feel like I just got like pounded with a fire hose of information. So thank you for that. We're gonna do some Q&A, but I just wanted to leave this screen up here for a second for folks who are like listening to this, going like, okay, like, geez, I didn't like realize like everything that was involved in this, or like March 29th, is that really true? Yes, it is. And so if you want that structured like accelerated help, Black Bolt is great for you, and we'd love to see you in the March cohort. Book a call with Katie through the QR here if you're not quite sure which package is right for you, or if you just have kind of additional detailed questions that you'd like to ask. So at this point, we're going to go to Q&A, and I'm going to pull up some of the pre-submitted questions that you all submitted, and we're just going to answer as many of those as we have time for. And then feel free to just pop additional questions here into the chat, and we'll answer them live as they come up. All right. Well, let's get into it. Let's start with networking. We've got a few questions around networking, and so we'll tackle those first. Miley, I'll turn this over to you. When networking, who are the right people to talk with? Is it partners? Is it hiring managers, consultants, etc.? And then the secondary question to that is, what types of questions or topics should I prepare for those conversations?
Great. So there are a few different people that you could reach out to. Um, Generally, I think the most responsive people tend to be the people who most recently graduated from undergrad. So those are probably the easiest to reach out to in terms of expecting an answer. And so that's typically what I say that you should, people that you should reach out to. And the reason for that is, yes, you're going to reach out to or respond to more likely to. But second, they are doing the job that you ultimately want to do. And so it's a good way to actually figure out, like, is this going to be the right cultural fit? Am I going to like this job here? Maybe they can give you some tips on how they succeeded in getting the job, etc. The other people that are good to reach out to are honestly upperclassmen at your current school. If there are people who have just completed the internship last year, those are good people to reach out to because they were also successful. And oftentimes the firms actually ask those people if they have any referrals or people that they should keep in mind. So I would see if there are any upperclassmen to reach out to. And then there are recruiters often listed, especially in what they call target schools, the schools that they typically recruit from. There's often a page for that specific school where it's listed out on that page who the main recruiters are. And that's both the recruiting or more like the HR people, as well as the consultants who are often available for coffee chats. And so we do recommend that, if you are a target school, you should go and look at that page and reach out to those people. But recruiters, some more of what you call an HR person, can be a good resource for figuring out things like application timeline, or if you have a special situation or something like that, you can talk to them. Otherwise, the consultants are a better resource for that. Now, those two people are great. If there is somebody more senior than that who you think is more likely to reach out to you for whatever reason, maybe they're from your hometown, or maybe they, you have a second connection to them somehow, or maybe, I don't know, a parent or somebody knows them, that might still be worth reaching out to those people. But if you can, try to get a warm introduction. So hopefully there's somebody who actually knows them who can connect you. Sorry, that was a really long answer, but
No, that's great. I mean, there's always nuance to this, but yeah, 100% generally, you want to be talking with the people that are right at the level or just one above the level you're applying for. And so you probably have some people on your campus who would be great folks to network with. So that can maybe help make the process a little less intimidating.
yeah. And then in terms of topics and questions, this does differ depending on the person you reach out to. So if it is as Jeff said, the person who just graduated or slightly above, that can be more like culture, understanding what types of projects they worked on, maybe getting some tips on the recruiting process, that sort of thing. Whereas, as I said, for more of the recruiters, that's more process oriented. So more so things like the application expectations, etc. And then I would say if it's anyone more senior, you will probably want to tweak your answers or your questions a little bit, talk more about their progression at the firm, or more big picture things like where they see the firm going or how they think the office is going to change over the next year. You might ask about the specific industry that they specialize in. So the topics kind of vary by person, but those are the most common things I think.
Love it. There was a question here that was asking if I should apply early to McKinsey's deadline, and just a quick answer is like no, there's no advantage to applying early. As long as you get it in by this specific time on March 29th, like you'll be good. McKinsey's not reviewing resumes, in advance of that deadline. So generally for MBB where there's a deadline, no advantage to applying early. Other boutique firms where there's like a rolling deadline situation, there's a different answer to that. But for here, you have it until March 29th. Okay, great. I see a bunch of questions coming into the chat. Let's move on to another pre-submitted question, and we'll get to those in a minute. What's the best way to maintain a relationship after the initial coffee chat? And I think maybe the question to ask before answering that is, should you want to maintain a relationship after the initial coffee chat? Miley, what are your thoughts on that?
Yes, definitely. I mean, you kind of have to read the conversation well. If it's somebody who's like really, brief with you and doesn't seem any interested in helping at all, it might not be worth your time to spend a lot of time trying to follow up with them. I would still write a thank you note to them and, ask them if we could reach out if you have further questions. But if it's somebody who seems pretty engaged and like seems that they're interested in helping you, I would especially try to continue that relationship. So write a thank you note. If there were any action items coming out of the call, like sometimes they'll say, hey, send me your resume. Send the resume. Or if they say, hey, I was going to connect you to somebody else in the office, say, oh, thanks for the call. Do you mind actually connecting me to that person? And you can continue to have touch points and update them as you go. So especially if they, offer to case prep you or something like that, keep track of that and reach back out to them when you feel ready to do that. But even just updating them like, hey, I just applied, I'm really excited about this, or hey, I had a follow-up question, do you mind just answering it? You don't want to be too annoying, obviously, but I find that a couple of touch points makes me really remember them. And sometimes I do go and say, hey, recruiting, like this person actually seems like a good fit.
That's awesome. Really helpful nuance there. Last networking question, then we'll pivot a little bit. And Katie, maybe you want to answer this one. I'll give Miley's voice a break. What's the best way to like get in touch with people you want to network with? And specifically, this is from someone who's having trouble getting replies.
Yeah, that's a great question. I know a lot of folks I talk to, a lot of black belts, ask, how do I connect with someone because I've sent countless messages over LinkedIn and nobody replies because the consultants are getting bombarded with outreach. And if that's not working for you, some of the ways you can connect is to find these warm connections, right? Like, a friend of a friend. Look at your alumni networks from your university. What clubs are you involved in where you might find some alumni that are in the firms that you want to be a part of? Go to events, go to virtual events, go to in-person events. These are the ways you get connected. And it does take a lot of effort. Your return is not that you're going to get 100% or even like 80% return on your effort. You want to get one contact from all of that effort that you can have a real conversation. So it is a lot of work, but you're trying to get, one, maybe two. I know we have the 2-2-2 philosophy. But it's think about warm contacts. These are the strongest contacts, friend of a friend, all this kind of stuff. Yeah. Great question. It's always hard, but have fun with it. Yeah.
Also, I would say if you can reach out to the email as opposed to LinkedIn, that sometimes works. You can usually get I guess what their email address is based off of the standardized format for the firm. So like, for example, Bain is like first name dot last name, that's Bain.com. So that's usually better than LinkedIn because they just get spam.
That is a great point, Miley. And thank you for raising that. You can actually look at our firm directory and we have those email conventions for firms available to you, which I can share in the link or in the chat, the link in the chat.
Love it. Yeah. I mean, we've got a resource for about everything. So we'll try to share all the ones that we have with you guys. Most of them are free, so that's great. This is a good question. There's a couple of freshmen on the call who submitted a kind of a similar question, and so like kind of summarized. It's like, if I'm a freshman, like what do I need to be doing between now and next spring to so I don't have to like have this kind of stress and pressure during sophomore and junior year. Miley, do you have any insights into that?
Yes, I think it's pretty uncommon for freshmen to have events by these firms, but I think there might be some special circumstances. So just like I would definitely sign up for the mailing list for all these firms so that in case there are special events, you can kind of get started on networking early. Otherwise, it's things like joining your consulting club if it makes sense to, and you have one on campus. It's starting to build out like who am I gonna reach out to. It's starting to even doing some case prep early on, or at least like knowing what a case is and all that stuff would be great. I'd also say like do things that are going to help boost your resume to a certain degree. So if there's an internship you can do this summer or in the fall, I would try to do that. Keep updating your resume, etc.
Katie, do you have anything to add to that?
I'm sorry, I was responding to something in the chat. Um,
No worries.
but I'm happy to chime in if you can repeat the question, or I can take the next one, whatever you want.
Uh, Great. We were just talking about kind of what freshmen can do, this summer, this semester, next school year to set themselves up for success, early before recruiting hits for 2020, I guess 2028 internships.
Yeah. Miley, I'm sure you provided all the answers, but I'll just jump in and say, get some sort of experience on your resume where you are either working with a startup or a business, you're providing advice that offers real or projected impact that is positive. Obviously, you don't want to have a negative impact, but do something that shows like you have analyzed a problem, you've identified the key issues, extracted those insights, and recommended it to somebody. You can do this in so many ways. Business is ideal, but you can do this in a club. You can do this for a nonprofit. So this gives you stories to talk about and shows why you're great wherever you go.
Love it. All right. Well, we've got 1 minute left. So, Katie, is there kind of a pressing question that you've seen come in that you feel like would be a good one to end on?
I think most of the questions have been answered, but let me just kind of like, I'll give a quick summary of what should I be doing right now, and is there anything I should wait on? Right
Love it.
now, you should be networking. I think Miley and Japheth have both said this. And two, prep for that case interview, 80/20, a little bit of fit. There is no time to waste. Time is of the essence, and your peers who are also pursuing consulting are doing this now. This is competitive, and you need to be a competitor by preparing.
Be a competitor. All right, y'all. Get your game face on and rock and roll. We're here for you. Excited to be, a part of your journey as much as we can be. So join us in Black Belt. Closes next Tuesday, March 10th. And honestly, I would encourage you not to wait till the deadline, because by that time, a lot of our coaches will be booked out weeks in advance. And so, if you want to, reserve your top coach, joining this week would be advisable for that. So for the last time here, I'll just share this screen and leave it up here while we close out, so you can scan that QR. We'll also send out the recording of this event along with kind of the essential links of what was discussed today. If there's something we just didn't have time to get to, so I know there's some questions that we just couldn't get to, just reach out. You have my email. You can reach out to our team as well. The email is just team@managementconsulted.com. We've got a McKinsey live case next Monday, March 9th. Please join us for that. Registration on the Management Consulted website. Click the events tab. We're doing events all the time. We've got a lot more great stuff coming up for you. Thank you so much, Miley, for the great lesson here today. Really insightful, informative, and engaging. I know folks got a lot out of it. And thank you so much, Katie, as well, here for helping corral the questions and answer the questions and just providing support. Really appreciate you. And with that, we will say adios. We'll see you on another call soon. Thanks, everybody. Go get 'em.